Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the committee for this opportunity. As a U.S. diplomat who dealt with consular issues during my postings in Trinidad, Cuba, Ecuador, and Mexico, I came into regular contact with widespread fraudulent activities related to obtaining a U.S. visa. The fraud took place at many levels. Sometimes it involved simple cases of altered documents, and other times it involved organized criminal networks that linked back to the United States. The most challenging and pernicious aspect of sophisticated fraud involved corrupt host government authorities who provided bogus official documents to crooked visa applicants. This unscrupulous practice is common in countries with widespread government corruption. The U.S. visa process is driven by documentation presented by applicants, particularly those that show their family relationships, educational and work history, police and medical records. In conspiracy with corrupt government officials, malfeasant visa applicants can obtain falsified birth, marriage, divorce, or police documents, among others. Years ago, the Congress passed the Immigration and Nationality Act to set the standards for U.S. consular officers to adjudicate visas. The INA rightly puts the burden of proof on visa applicants to demonstrate their bona fides to receive a visa benefit. This process, however, is fundamentally complicated when applicants can procure from local corrupt government authorities, through bribes or illicit favors, official documentation that falsely attests to vital information. When visa applicants present such falsified documentation, the burden of proof, in effect, has been flipped back on the consular officer to demonstrate that the government-issued document is bogus. Demonstrating such fraud is a supreme challenge for consular officers. Only so much information can be extracted during a short visa interview. Consular field investigations are costly and time-consuming, and very few can be rigorously followed up. In addition, for many years, State Department had prioritized issuing visas over investigating fraud. Consular officers were given interview quotas, posts were ordered to avoid visa backlogs and waiting times, and plus there were always powerful voices in Washington constantly insisting that all visas be issued, and fast. Over the decades of my career, almost nobody spoke up for those consular officers who did not want to issue visas because they had fraud concerns. So what can be done? My recommendation is to make the host governments where our embassies operate take responsibilities for their citizens who present fraudulent documents. Right now, these governments typically ignore the fraud. The number of criminal prosecutions that host governments undertake against local fraud rings and their own corrupt bureaucrats are very, very few. Each U.S. embassy writes an annual report on the visa fraud in the host country where they work. These reports are a wealth of information on visa fraud in that country and across the world, but State Department keeps these documents as internal. They do not make them public, and they do almost nothing with them. This is a big mistake. These reports should be made part of the bilateral agenda in all countries where the fraud is high. Unofficially, consular officers speak of many high visa fraud countries, such as Bangladesh, Brazil, China, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Ghana, Haiti, India, Mexico, Nigeria, the Philippines, and Vietnam, to name just some. Unfortunately, the State Department almost never raises this issue on the bilateral agenda. Now is the moment for State Department to use these reports to take the diplomatic offensive against high fraud countries. Instead of dealing with each visa fraud applicant as an endless series of isolated problems, U.S. policy should curtail visa services in those countries that tolerate or are complicit in high levels of fraud. The lesson is that visa fraud must be addressed overseas. Host governments cannot be allowed to turn a blind eye to what their unscrupulous citizens do to obtain a U.S. visa. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.